All right. Good Tavach. Shavua Tov. An amazing, great week. And of course, thank you. And a great week, of course, begins with the study of Torah. Ooh.
Absolutely.
But you're all going to be part of a Tivasri Toiv phone call.
To mention a name at the Oizal, please state the name and mother's name twice and begin recording after the tone. Anna, et Hashem v'shem ha'em achrei ha'tiftu.
Please leave a message after the tone.
This is a Tivasri Toiv to give over good news, as our dear son Shneur Zalman ben Simcha Rachel, Shneur Zalman Alevi ben Simcha Rachel, and his wife Menucha Rachel Bas Rivka, she just gave birth to a baby girl.
Mazel tov.
Birth to a baby girl. Mazel tov, mazel.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
Baruch atah Adonai Mechelam she'akol nidvarei.
Kol hakavod.
L'chaim, l'chaim, and mazel tov, mazel tov. It was right before the class.
Mazel tov.
I was just busy with my mother and sisters, telling them, and I realized I have to give over the good news to the Rebbe, to Vatri Toiv, as the Rebbe gave me an answer once to give over good news. So I had to give over the good news. So you all shared with that. Mazel tov, yes, Baruch Hashem. Blessed we are.
Amen.
Blessed we are, blessed they are, blessed Klal Yisrael, and wow, Baruch Hashem, very special. So welcome. You know, such good news, living in challenging, difficult, dark times, make life sweet. And so the question, of course, becomes, you know, how comfortable do you get when Kanai Nahara, you have your children and they're having families and they're growing, and it's beautiful to be, you know, to see the growth in Golus, in exile. How comfortable do we get with that? Do we remain comfortable? Or with all of the joy, perhaps we're not to be so comfortable where we are. Now, if we're not comfortable, of course, what happened in Bondi, and because of that, that brings a fright to us of what our future is, then that's a no-no. That means a lack of faith. That means evil is having a dominance over us. It's dominating us in such a manner that it's making us fearful. And as the Baal Shem Tov was told by his father before he passed away, he was only 5 years old, that his father told him, don't fear anyone except for God. There's no fear, only of God, of the presence of God, not even the consequence and the punishment of God, but of the presence of God. So there's nothing to fear. So if there's nothing to fear in the world that we live in, be comfortable. Or with all of the joyous occasion, all the good things, right, simchas, maybe yet we shouldn't get so comfortable here. Maybe this is not our place. So let's go through the journey and let us find out. Okay. If you have oh, perfect. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Milchai. Thank you. So that is our challenge today. Okay. So Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our forefather, he spent his last 17 years in Egypt in a rural area called Goshen, where he creates a vibrant family. And in his final moments, he asks his son,
Wie is hem het?
please stay mute, folks. Thank you. Okay. Second, let's make sure we're doing good here. Okay, excellent. Okay, let's share. Thank you. That's interesting. I don't have it here. Let's figure this out. Okay. Something's not working here. Give me a moment. Okay. There we go. Now let's see if this is going to work. All right. Next one's there.
Yes,
Okay.
before his death.
Yeah. Okay. So before the death of Yaakov, made Yosef take an oath to bury him in Israel, not in Egypt. Okay. First text. In Israel, Jacob's days neared his passing. He summoned his son Yosef and said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please place your hand under my thigh. Treat me with loving kindness and truth to bury me in Egypt. I will lie with my forefathers, and you will carry me from Egypt and bury me in their burial place." And Yosef replied, "I will do as you asked." And the next verse it says, "And he said, swear to me." And Yosef swore to him, and Yisrael prostrated himself on the head of the bed. So in a nutshell, he wants to be buried only in the land of Israel. Yosef consents, but he's not satisfied with his word, and he makes him take an oath. So the obvious question is, why does he make him take an oath? We're talking about Yosef, right? Upstanding individual. He has the position of authority that he can take him out of Egypt. Why would he do that? So it's pretty simple idea, as we see in the following teachings of the Rebbe Rashab. When you take an oath, no obstacle can stop you, and you're compelled to get it done. An oath marshals our concealed intrinsic powers, and once these are activated, nothing can stand in our way. As our sages say, nothing stands in the way of the will. So the oath touches a very deeper place within us, that no matter what happens, there's not room for failure. That's what the oath means. Failure is not an option. If you make a promise to somebody, right? So then, well, there might be obstacles, there might be difficulties, right? There's a limitation to the extent that you're going to even expect yourself, right? And we can understand that there could be great obstacles over here, because Yaakov brought blessings to Egypt when he came. So when he dies, who would want him to stay there? Pharaoh. The people of Egypt want him to be there. He's a source of blessing. So there would be great resistance, right? And from others, it would also be great resistance. So if you're making only a promise, maybe those forms of resistance would be too much. But when you take an oath, it brings out the power from within the individual that you'll transcend whatever it is because of the oath that you've taken, as the Ramban explains in text number 3. Jacob did not suspect his righteous, beloved son would disobey his father's instructions and his own words. I will do as you ask. Jacob asked for an oath to make it difficult for Pharaoh to refuse. Pharaoh might want to keep Joseph in Egypt and tell him to send Jacob with his other brothers and servants. Or Pharaoh might insist that the prophet Jacob be buried in Egypt, bringing honor and merit into Egypt. Forcing Yosef to take an oath would make Pharaoh hesitant because asking someone to betray their oath is wrong. Being bound by an oath would also force Yosef to try harder. And this is precisely how it played out, right? We get that. That makes sense, right? But we need to look a little more carefully over here, right? We get this, but if we look at text number 1, if we go back to text number 1 for a moment. So in text 30, in verse 30 rather, it says, I will lie with forefathers, and you carry me from Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And Joseph replied, I will do as you asked. Right? And when was that? He already had his hand in the place where he was making the oath, right? And then it repeats in verse 31, and he said, swear to me. And Joseph swore to him, but he already swore to him the first time. He already had his hand right? So it sounds from here that there's a second oath that's taking place. Not very clear what that is. And we're not informed with anything clear, but it seems that there's another oath that's taking place over here. What is that? Okay, so let's hold on to that question. 2 oaths, what's the second oath? Need to understand, right? Because again, the first oath is about being buried, right? It's very clear in verse 29 and 30. I will do as you ask, all about the burial. And then he says, swear to me. And he does, but for what? What's he swearing for? If he already swore. So it's a second oath. Not clear what that is. Okay? Let's leave that aside for a moment. But we have another very challenging question that we need to deal with. And that is, why does Yaakov want to leave Egypt, to leave his family, literally his family, extended family, to go to Israel, to be buried in Israel? Now, he knows that there is a future of the Jewish people to be enslaved in Egypt. Why wouldn't he want to be there with the enslaved Jews throughout their difficulty, right? Now, to save himself, but not to be there for his family, that doesn't seem something that a righteous person would do, right? Think about it. If he would be buried in Goshen, they were there for 210 years, minus the 17 years. So 194 years that they would have Yaakov's burial spot that the Jewish people could go there to pray, to look for guidance, to look for salvation. Yaakov loved his children. Why wouldn't he do this? The Zohar asks this question. The Zohar says, Rabbi Yossi said, given that Jacob knew that his children would be subject to exile in Egypt, why was he not buried there so his merit could shield his children? Why did he want to escape Egypt? Is it not written, as a father has compassion for his children? Where was his compassion? So why does he leave? So Rashi provides for us today actually three reasons, if you remember today in Chumash Rashi, but none of them demonstrate any compassion towards his children. One was, do not bury me in Egypt. Its soil will become infested with lice swarming under my body. Second reason, when the dead come back to life during the resurrection of the dead, those buried outside of Israel will endure the pain of rolling through subterranean tunnels to Israel. And the third reason, I don't want Egyptians to turn me into a deity. These are all good and fine, these explanations. Excuse me a moment. Sorry. Hi. So, good reasons, but they're all for Yaakov's sake, right? They're all for his sake. How about what's good for his children? Especially a shepherd of Israel, we know that they're always concerned for their children. Why isn't he not?
Could it be because he wants to be in so-called his home? In other words, he wants his children to eventually follow him to Israel.
Very good. Yes, that's true. That's true, but that doesn't, you already have Avram and Yitzchak buried there. You have Sarah, Rivka, and Leah buried there. So if you need, to, but that's good. That's good. Let's play it out further. We're not finished. Okay. Well, if it's that important, let's play it the other side of the coin, right? If it's that important to be buried in Israel, like you're saying, then why didn't Yosef get buried in Israel? Why is it only he leaves instructions that at the end of the exile in Egypt, when they're about to be redeemed, that he should be exhumed and brought out from Egypt to be buried in Israel, in Shechem? Right? As the verse says, this week's parsha, Joseph told his brothers, I will die and God will surely remember you and raise you from this land to the land he promised you to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph insisted on an oath from his children of Israel, saying, God will surely remember you, and you shall take my bones out of here. So if Yaakov had good reason to be buried in Israel, we had three reasons for him. Why wouldn't that apply to Yosef just the same? Right? Now, on a simple level, you could just answer, well, Yaakov had Yosef to take him out. Who did Yosef have that could take him out? Yosef was viceroy of Egypt. He had the power. Pharaoh would listen to him. And when he would pass away, well, there's no more a viceroy. then who would have the power to do it? That's what could be simply maybe understood. As Rashi says, Yosef said, I was a ruler over Egypt and I had the authority to bury my father in Israel. However, the Egyptians will prevent my children from doing the same to me. Therefore, he made them promise that they would take him along when they left. So perhaps that's a sufficient reason in a simple meaning of the text, according to Rashi. But the Rebbe wants to dig a bit deeper and says, well, a righteous person, nothing happens to them by consequence, by ramification, by by caused by some other incidental. In other words, oh, there is no one to take him to be buried, so therefore he couldn't be buried in Israel. Can't say that about a righteous person. A righteous person, if he wanted to be buried in Israel, he would be buried in Israel. How? Okay. You know, that's actually what happened with the Rambam, Maimonides. He passed away in Egypt, and his camel took him as a dead on a camel all the way to Tzfas and kneeled down finally when he came to the place where he is buried. Yeah. So God takes care of the righteous people because the righteous people are in control. So Yosef is righteous. It wasn't incidental because it's circumstantial. Nothing is circumstantial by the righteous. Truth is, nothing is circumstantial by us, but we're just not aware. We think it's circumstantial. But by the righteous, they know it's not circumstantial. They are in total control of the circumstance. Hence, we can't say that Yosef didn't have the ways and the means. No, can't be that way. If Yosef wanted to be buried in Israel, he'd be buried in Israel. He didn't want. So why does he choose to remain? So the Rebbe explains. Yosef was buried in Egypt, unlike Jacob, who was buried in Israel to empower the Jews while still in Egypt to overcome the exile and control it rather than be controlled by it. This made it possible for them to leave Egypt. Oh, so now the opposite were playing, right? Yosef didn't stay in Egypt out of submission because he had no alternative. He remained there to help the people. He would never let the exile define him. Just as he was leader, viceroy in Egypt, he was in total command of himself in his Jewishness, in his connection to God, completely so. So likewise, staying there, he would be in complete control, meaning he would be there as a presence for the people to give them strength. But then, of course, we got a problem here. This reinforces now the other side of the coin. So why not Yaakov the same thing? For the same reason, Yaakov should be left behind. No doubt that would empower. Is that clear? Yeah. Let's make sure over here. Yes, folks, we're clear on that? Okay. Hi. Hi.
Chaim.
Okay. So the Rebbe explains as follows. Rebbe explains as follows. Let's take a step at a time over here. Hi. That Yaakov, intrinsic to who he is, he cannot stay in Egypt. The type of soul that he is, the person that he is, the function, therefore, that he serves, the role that he plays, he can't be in Egypt. He just was in Egypt for 17 years. Not only that, it says it was the 17 best years. 17 is the numerical value of Tov, good. They were good years, right? Because the truth is, in the enclave that he had in Egypt, in Goshen, the rural area, with a yeshiva there that Yehuda went beforehand to set up, and the family all together, tightly knit, and so on. Yes, he lived. It's not like he was in Egypt. He was transcendent of Egypt. Egypt was the place he was in a physical sense, right? But he created a holy environment with his family there. And how was he able to do that? Because of Yosef. Yosef being the viceroy. So it allowed for him and the family to live in a secluded, holy environment, even though it's Egypt, but he was able to create the community, the study of Torah, and everything that was necessary in a secluded, beautiful environment. And it's a unique land that already had a connection to the Jewish people. If you recall, when Sarah was abducted by Pharaoh, right? This, as Avram said, she is my sister, right? If you recall, what did Pharaoh do? He gave land as a gift. You know what the land was? Goshen. It's the land of Goshen. So we already have a connection to the land. It's something that's given to the Jewish people, and therefore became a mini Israel carved out in Egypt, where they studied Torah, practiced Judaism, and so on. But this was only due to the possible influence of Yosef. Once Yosef is no longer the viceroy in Egypt, there's no way he could stay there. It would all collapse. It's not a place for him. Hence, what does he say? Take me out of here. Right? With this, now we can understand the second oath that he took. Remember, we asked the question. If you look at the verse very clearly, states that he placed his hand to take an oath, and he explained everything about the burial. Take me to Israel, bury me there with my forefathers. And then afterwards, a second oath. What was that? See, you see, in soul and therefore in function, Yaakov and Yosef were very different. Very, very different. Yaakov would not be able to thrive in Egypt without Yosef being there, the viceroy, and enabling the environment that Yaakov created that would be secluded, and it would be mini Israel in Egypt. But without Yosef, it wouldn't be there. Yosef, on the other hand, thrived without Yaakov there, without anybody there. and he thrived, right? As a matter of fact, not only did he thrive, but all of the latent talents that he had and the capabilities, God-given capabilities he had, truly came to light, truly revealed themselves because of being in Egypt, not in spite of it, but because of it. If he lived in the land of Israel of everything being holy, those qualities wouldn't have emerged. He's a different type of soul. Yosef lived and breathed an environment that was dark that could be transformed into light. That's what he breathed. That's what he was. That's what his capacity was. He actually couldn't understand the opposite. He saw that Egypt is a place to transform. And therefore, that was his purpose, because that was the uniqueness of his soul. Therefore, Yosef would never abandon the Jews. He would never abandon the Jews. He would always stay there. Yaakov recognized this in him. He recognized that this is his unique soul power, very different than him, very unique. And therefore, he understood. The first oath that he took to come and bury me was that if you're going to have any obstacles in life outside of you, Pharaoh, the Egyptians, even the family, right? Family doesn't want their father to leave. Should be buried and stay with them. All of those obstacles he would be able to deal with. After all, he's the viceroy of Egypt. So that was the first oath that he took. The second oath was a different one, as it had to do about no one but himself. That he himself would have a challenge. How could it be that he should not remain here in Egypt? We need you here. You can transform our world for us. You need to stay here. Because of that, he made him take the second oath. They're different souls. The first oath was to empower Yosef to overcome external obstacles. And the second one, that he would have a natural hesitation that needs to be overcome because of the uniqueness of what his soul is. And therefore makes him swear that he should overcome his own natural inclination, his own perspective and view of how he sees the purpose of his father even. Is that clear?
Here.
All right.
Otherwise, he might have been tempted to keep him in Egypt.
Based. No, and one sec. He made him take an oath. But that's all the obstacles that are out there. But then there's the obstacles inside of him that he made him take a second oath that you have to overcome those private things, those internal things. And that's why he doesn't say anything, because it's internal. It's an oath about him, not about an oath of anything, so to speak, outside of him, right? He would be his own obstacle. Is that clear? So the Alter Rebbe second. Tell me if I have the right one here. Oops. Obviously. What's going on here? What do you see over here?
Joseph was buried in Egypt.
What text?
8:8.
8. Okay. Ay, 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 diddy, die, ay, ay. What's it say there?
Still excellent.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, wait a second. I know it. What text 8? The text 8 up there, Angelo? By you?
It's 5.
It's 5.
Text 5.
All right.
See the text in small.
Okay.
6.
Okay. All right. There we go. Now we got it. Okay. So the Rebbe Shab says the Hebrew word shavua, oath, is sova, full, satiated, or similar. This indicates that an oath satiates or fills us with strength. We are satiated by the empowerment we receive from God for our oath to study the Torah and practice the mitzvahs. When we eat and are full, we are physically stronger and happier. The same applies in a spiritual sense. When we take an oath, God fills us with power, and we are satiated, empowered from above to overcome the wiles of our animal soul and the sinful temptations. So, the godly soul has to contend with an animal soul, right? And its desires. So therefore, God gives us an empowerment. He satiates our soul with an empowerment. That's what the idea of an oath is, that we take before we come into this world, as we learn from the first chapter of Tanya, in order to endure the animal soul and to overcome it. The same applies with Yosef. Yosef has his inclination. Now, it's not the animal soul's inclination, but it's his unique inclination in divine service. He needs to take an oath in order to overcome his own path. And this is what the second oath is, right? That he should overcome what his natural understanding of the way to serve God, what he perceives to be the greater way to serve God, is to be in Egypt, in the dark world, and to transform it. Stay in Egypt as he does, right, after his passing, in order to be there in the dark times for the Jewish people, in order to help them transform their dark times, to be there with them. Does that make sense? Yeah, is that clear? Okay, with this, we understand the second oath. But what you don't have an answer, though, is why Yaakov seemingly is abandoning his children. So you say that it's not your path, right? But Is it about you, or is it about what you're needed for? Do the people need you? If they need you to be there, so you need to be there. How do we understand that? So the Talmud tells us an interesting story. He fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan came to visit him, and he asked him, "Do you enjoy suffering?" Here's the story. Rabbi Chia fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan came to visit and asked, "Do you enjoy suffering?" Rabbi Chia replied, "I don't like suffering, and I don't like its reward." Rabbi Yochanan said, "Give me your hand." He gave Rabbi Yochanan his hand and was miraculously cured. Rabbi Yochanan fell ill, and Rabbi Hanina came to visit him. He said, "Do you enjoy suffering?" Rabbi Yochanan replied, "I don't like suffering, and I don't like its reward." Rabbi Hanina said, "Give me your hand." He gave Rabbi Hanina his hand, and he was miraculously cured. So they asked the question, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan cure himself? Good question, right? He healed Rabbi Chia. Why didn't he heal himself? Evidently, this was meant when they say prisoners cannot free themselves. If you're in prison, you can't take yourself out of prison. Someone outside of prison has to take. He was in imprisonment of needing healing. Someone outside of him needed to bring him the healing. Right? That clear? So Yosef, where is he? He's in prison. Together with who? The rest of the Jewish people in Egypt for the 210 years or minus, right? He's there. But where is he? In prison. Someone who's in prison cannot free themselves out of prison. At the same time, imagine children are in prison alone. That's difficult. If they have their father with them, it makes it easier in prison. But it's not freeing. It just makes it easier. So Yosef was there with them in prison in Egypt to make it easier for them. But in the end, that won't be enough to free them. Why? Because someone who's imprisoned can't release themselves. If you're in handcuffs, you're not going to be able to release yourself. You need someone outside of you to release you. That's why they needed Yaakov on the outside. Yaakov didn't abandon his children to flee to Israel. Yes, it's true, his soul is not a soul to remain there. But in a greater sense, not being able to remain there gave him the power to be the influence for those who do remain in Egypt and are there to be imprisoned. He will be the support outside of prison to bring them out of prison. Therefore, he has to be taken out, because his soul will be what is necessary to leverage the escape of the Jewish people when the time will come. As the Rebbe says in this week's Sicha, so he didn't abandon, went to Israel to pray and empower for the future redemption, while Yosef remained in Egypt to guide and inspire during exile. He wasn't deserting them, he was enabling the future liberation. So, as the Rebbe says in this week's Sicha, Jacob had to transcend Egypt's culture and power. He was also needed to bind Yosef with an oath to carry him out of Egypt. This is how Jacob lifted and bound Yosef to his level to be exalted above Egypt. This is implied by the instructions of Yosef to take him up from Egypt. In turn, this enabled Yosef to channel this transcendence over Egypt to all Jews, so that God's promise to Jacob that I will surely lift you would come true for all Jews. The people would be lifted from their submission to Egypt. So again, let's take the metaphor. children are in prison. Of course, if they're there with their father, it's a lot more comforting. The Jewish people are there in prison in Egypt. It's much more comforting knowing that Yosef is there with you. His remains are there. You know that he's there with you. He's a protectorate for you. He's taking care of you there. But at the same time, to get out of the prison, it's not enough. You need someone on the outside. You need your grandfather, right? You need your grandfather. You need a Zaidi. Oh, how apropos is I just became a Zaidi again, right? As I mentioned at the beginning of the class, right? So how apropos? You need a Zaidi. Yaakov is the Zaidi. He is the grandfather. He's on the outside, there to pray for the Jewish people that they should be released. So here you have like a 1-2 punch from the inside and the outside in order to be there for the Jewish people. And each one, because of the uniqueness of their soul, was fulfilling exactly what they needed to fulfill. Yaakov is a soul of Atzilus. He's a soul beyond, transcendent. So he always has to remain transcending. Even when he's in Egypt, he's transcending Egypt. He's there or not there at the same time. Yosef is Ela told us Yosef. Ela told us Yaakov, Yosef. These are the generation. This is the offspring of Yaakov. Who's the offspring? Yosef, right? As the Torah portion of Vayeshev. So meaning Yaakov, he's the Atzilus, the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, the world that is transcendent of creation. That's where his soul comes from. Yosef's soul is a soul that enters into the world, not touched by the world, right? His soul is an offspring of his father that goes like Atzilus, goes into Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, gives birth to, right? So his soul is that offspring that goes into the world to be there, part of the world, but not affected by the world in order to transform the world. Each one was a different soul and therefore had a different function. So therefore he remains with the people, being that he's a soul of creation, as opposed Yaakov is a soul beyond creation. Is that clear? So, what does this mean? What does this all mean? How do we tie all this together? What's the deeper meaning over here? So, there's two different dimensions over here, right? Two different individuals over here, and each one are playing a key role. So, on the one hand, to be like Yosef means to be into this world and not to be at all moved by and feared by anything in this world. This world doesn't move us, we move it. Yosef was the viceroy of Egypt. He wasn't moved by it. He didn't feel, glorified. He didn't feel special. The viceroy of Egypt. No. He wasn't moved by it. He moved it. He remained true and steadfast to who he is. That's the lesson that we learned in previous classes. We've learned this notion already. Here we come to another notion. The Yaakov's attitude is Firstly, when you are in Egypt, make Egypt into Israel. Mach Eretz Israel, make here the holiness of the Holy Land of Israel, wherever you are, in the Egypt that you're in. Make that into a holy abode. How do you do that? By recognizing that you're never comfortable where you are. What does it mean you're not comfortable? Not because you are fearful of what's going around you, so you're always looking for anti-Semitism to rear its ugly head. No, we're not looking for that. We're not at all moved by that, right? So what does it mean that this is not my home? Because in the end, this is Egypt, this is exile, and this is not where we're meant to be. Where we're meant to be is at our Father's table, around the table with Hashem, in the Holy Land, not in the Holy Land the way it is today. We call it the Holy Land, but it's not the Holy Land. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, is in there, even though miracles of God are like, whoa, over the top. Over the top, the miracles that God is providing for the Jewish people now. There's no question about it, right? But this is not where we belong. We belong in an environment that is purely holy with God's presence. And therefore, we're not satisfied, even though, yes, we have another grandchild and, giving another class and another good thing and another wonderful thing. At the same time, we should feel that, no, I'm comfortable in who I am. I am strong in who I am. As a Jew, as a chassid of the Rebbe, Torah and mitzvahs, very strong, but still don't feel that this is, this is it. This is not it. This is not it. This is not what it's meant to be. Even though we might be doing amazing, wonderful things. As we see from the Rebbe, as he spoke 11 months before he had his stroke, to the day, saying that everything that he has done is for nothing because he only has one accomplishment in life, and that's to bring the final redemption, to bring Mashiach, to bring a world that should be redeemed. Not that there should be a place where there's darkness, but all the light of God should be illuminating the entire world. And to feel comfortable in exile, even though with great accomplishments. I mean, you think about it, no one in the history of mankind has accomplished what the Rebbe has accomplished. Moses led people in the desert. He didn't lead people throughout the entire universe. Even in the desert, he had a difficulty leading, stiff-necked people. But imagine leading them in a free world where you could, choose whatever you want in this world. And the Rebbe has an army of people that are completely devoted. This is like a major accomplishment. 5,000 Chabad houses, 10,000 plus shluchim and shluchais. That's like amazing. And it could be something very comforting. And in a sense, it is comforting because, we want to, when you see the darkness of the world, the anti-Semitism of the world, you want something on the other side of it to be able to counter it. So that's something that's comforting, that people coming back to Judaism, a world that's open to it, that had never been before. The Rebbe says, don't get too comfortable. Meaning, that's funny. I put up my hand and it picked up my hand for me. How did I do that? me see. Do that? No, it didn't. Fine. Um, when you're not quite comfortable, what do? You're always in mode of doing another thing, another action, another mitzvah, another, right? When you get comfortable, what happens? You sit back and you relax. And you don't do the next mitzvah so quickly. So in the act of not being so comfortable, what it's going to lead us is to do something more. Again, it doesn't mean not to be comfortable in your skin. Be comfortable in who you are, in your skin as a Jew. Be comfortable in your, in your commitment to Hashem, that you're, that this is who you and what you are. And that be comfortable. But in your place in the diaspora, in this dark world, we shouldn't feel death and taxes are a reality. They're a temporary reality.
Death and taxes?
Are a temporary reality, right? But Mashiach, and to bring to the final redemption, that's the true reality that we're working and striving and to bring. Mashiach now. Any questions, any comments? Is that clear?
Not to lose sight of the ultimate goal. Become so comfortable that we forget that it's galut.
Right. Well, think about it.
Become so comfortable.
Right, but think about it. Never before have we had such material wealth. Never before have we had such spiritual wealth. Think about it. Even though we may not be so lofty of a soul, but the spiritual wealth that we are capable of having today, 200 years ago, how many people were able to study Torah? A fraction of people, a few people. So you had great scholars, you had great people, but most people were ignorant. They barely knew how to pray in Hebrew, right? At the age of 6 or maybe 10, they were already working for their family. 200, maybe a little more than 200 years ago. Let's say 300 years ago, for sure. They're already working for their family at the age of 6, 10. If they were scholarly, so they would be of the few. If they were scholarly, a regular person, today a regular person is in school and learning and has access like never before. So materially and spiritually, we're living in very unique times, the best of times, the best of opportunities. Yes, there's a lot of darkness out there, no question about it, but you can't compare the darkness to the 30s. Like, who wants to trade for the 30s, right? Who wants to trade for, the early 1900s? I don't think anybody wants to trade for those times. Maybe you want to go back to those times just to be a fly on the wall because of the history, right? But that's when you want to live, or would you rather live now? Unique times we're in. And therefore it's very easy to become comfortable in the spiritual greatness of the times, right?
Therefore, not have that enough big of a thirst for Mashiach.
Right. Because listen, we're accomplishing so much now, right? But no. Yaakov teaches us, carry me out of here. This is not my place, right? The lesson from Yaakov, right? The lesson from Yosef is, I'm on top of the world, viceroy of Egypt. Nothing can bring me down in my connection to God. That's a lesson we've already learned in previous couple of classes. Here we're learning a new lesson from Yaakov, that this is not my place. Carry me out of here. I got to be I got to be with my forefathers, right? This is not my place. So this is not our place. We stand higher than it. We're greater than it. We're in that respect, we're like Yaakov, that lofty soul, that we shouldn't get comfortable here and feel that this is, hey, this is my reality. No, it's what we got to work with. It's the world that we're in, and we're not running away from it. It's not about running away from it. It's about an attitude of, this is sort of where I want to be. Not, we want to be with Mashiach. Final redemption. L'chaim, l'chaim. Is that clear, folks? Any questions?
Yeah. How do we know the 30s aren't catching up with us? I mean,
How do we know? Sorry?
how do we know that the 30s aren't catching up with us? I mean, how comfortable can we really be in some places? In Toronto, they had senior center, they had somebody tear down mezuzahs and
Right.
so on. So what's our level of not of being comfortable but not being comfortable, being here but not here?
Right. So I think, it's easy to say, it's harder to live it, but I at least I got to share what the Rebbe, would say. We should never be fearful of the evils that are happening around us. That doesn't mean we should be stupid and not take note and not take heed, right? And make sure you have proper security and so on and so forth, right? No, 100%, we need to do that. At the same time, we shouldn't be fearful of evil, because evil is only given a right to rear its ugly head only as a guise. It's not true reality, because true reality is Einod Milvado, nothing else but God. It's only given the power to lift its ugly head in order to make me fearful. And the whole point is that we shouldn't be fearful, because it's there in order to bring fear. And am I going to succumb to that? So again, that doesn't mean that we're not more careful with our mezuzahs as a result, if that be the case, or we're not, more careful when we have a gathering and, proper security and so on and so forth. We're not suggesting otherwise, but that we should be fearful of the evil around us is just giving the evil the control over us rather than we're in control over it. So that's the first thing. So therefore, with that, we're, it's not about that we're comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with me. And therefore, I'm comfortable with me. You don't stare me. You don't, I don't know how to translate that into English, stare in Yiddish. It's a Yiddish word. No, Lisha. You don't stare me. You don't, you're not a challenge for me. You're not a difficulty for me, because you're nothing. You're nothing. Right? That's the attitude. Listen, that's the attitude. It's an avodah to work on that. It's not so simple, but that's the attitude to try to work on to have that sentiment for ourselves. And if someone doesn't have that, shouldn't knock them down, because it's natural that people are going to be frightened. But for ourselves, that's what we should try to work on, to have that kind of sentiment. And so what are we not comfortable with? Of the very notion of being exiled, that exile is in its good stuff. Like, exile is a great opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for mitzvahs. And yes, we should take the opportunity to do mitzvahs. It's an opportunity of taking darkness and transforming it into light. It's amazing. And with that, we should be very happy to do. But the place of exile is not my place. It's where I work. It's where I gotta serve God. But that's not my reality. My reality is a godly one, not a dark one. Does that make sense?
Yes, to a certain extent it does. It's just so much tragedy happening in all parts of the world. It's not just Europe.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, 100%.
everywhere. It's not
Everywhere, everywhere.
objective.
100%. 100%. It is. And some of it, I mean, a lot of it is very painful. Is very painful. And you know, we need to yeah. By the way, pain doesn't, to be pained by it, we need to be pained by all of the suffering that people go through. We shouldn't just make that the reality we live with. Right? All right, folks. You're all amazing. Thank you very much. Good Tavach. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good evening.